quiet night, a lady is walking by her lonesome when she encounters a glowing, magnificent carnival. Within this place, she sees scores of folks lining up at the largest big top tent. She pushes through to the front of the crowd and lays eyes upon the showman on stage, twiddling large dolls sat beside him. The show begins. The stage is alight with the intricate movements of the showman, his incredibly detailed and realistic-looking marionettes, his fellow lovely stage performers, animals, colors, dance, action! The lady is spellbound by the performance. It's the greatest show she's ever seen. Then, seemingly after an instant, it's over, and everyone else has left the theater, leaving her alone once more. The lady begins to take her leave as well, to return to her quaint little life and forget this ever happened. But then, she hears a call. She looks back. She is confronted by the showman, who asks her that if she was so spellbound by the show, then why not be part of it? All those lights, all that admiration, he could allow her to bask in it too. She's touched by the idea that the showman would recognize her as being worthy of his show. She says yes. The showman takes her hand and leads her backstage. He fits her with a dress like the ones worn by the other performers. She loves it. The showman takes her by the hand again. It is time for her to perform. She is nervous. The showman assures her that she has nothing to worry about because everyone is going to love her. They're calling her name, calling her to the stage. She just needs to bring the stage alight. She is excited. She peeks from behind the curtain to see the crowd, but instead of excited patrons, she witnesses the twisted grins and grimaces of an indifferent mob, and she gets cold feet. She looks back, having second thoughts. She realizes that none of this makes sense, that she doesn't actually know what it is she's supposed to do when it's time. She is confronted by the showman. For you see, it's showtime, and she is on. The showman pulls and twists and nags at her limbs with sparkling strings, forcing her body to dance on its own. Fly, she flies. Dance, she dances. She soars, turns steps, all the prances, as the audience looks on with gleeful glances. The horrifying realization comes crawling into every joint that the puppets she saw on stage earlier weren't puppets. At least, not always. Just like the women taken by the stage before her, the strings break her, her arms and head and dress flying off like a mannequin being torn apart. Meanwhile, the showman dances with what's left of her amidst thunderous applause as the curtain falls on a macabre stage and the book closes on the lady's little life. This is The Greatest Living Show, an animated music video written and composed by Toby Fox of Undertale fame, then translated into Japanese and performed by Itoki Hana, and animated solo over the course of 2 years by Bonnie-chan, finally being released on March 30th of 2023. And it is one of the most profoundly horrifying pieces of art I have ever witnessed. It is with little irony or exaggeration when I say this 4 to 5 minute music video has more artistry and symbolism to chew on than some entire films. And I'm gonna prove it. After experiencing it just now, I'm sure you're thinking it too. That was goddamn weird. I mean, puppets, strings, hands, what the hell does any of that mean? Well, you just leave that to me. For today, we're gonna be doing something a little different as I rigorously analyze every fathom of this masterpiece. I will also be covering the associated art book as well, released on Fangamer 5 months after the video's release. It contains various details and assets from the music video, from backgrounds to animation frames, as well as other behind-the-scenes information. But before we can get to discussing that, I'll need to get you all grossly familiar with this music video, just as I have become. So, with all that said, let's start over and go back to the beginning. When the video opens, the first thing we see is the moon reflected in the water before it pans up to show the tops of the carnival towering over the oak and forest trees. We then meet our protagonist, who we'll call the lady, hands together, hair blowing in the cold wind, a look of profound awe across her face. You see, the very first shot was from her perspective as she walks around the woods about her usual business, only to by chance spot the carnival in the distance. Amazed, she arrives at the entrance, which towers over her like the gaping maw of a lion, befitting the lion statues decorated to each side. She takes a step forward and her whole body dissipates, symbolically showing how, just as art can make one feel as though they've been transported to another world, the lady, upon entering the carnival, feels as though she has just been taken to some new and wondrous place. Spellbound, she runs headlong into the carnival, drawn to a certain spot, having no idea what this place is, yet her body moves on its own as if it knows exactly where to go. It is when she arrives that she is shown materializing back into being as she looks up in awe, surprised at where her legs have taken her. A great big soft scent, the amber writing above the door reading "Bring the Stage Alight." Perplexing. Not the show's title, The Greatest Living Show, nor the name of the performer or group, but rather a command. For some reason, this is the most important piece of information for the audience to know upon their arrival. When before there were leaves blowing in the wind around, now there is only confetti and party favors as we gaze into this man-made location. The lady enters and is confounded by two starkly different groups of people, both of whom, she finds, she is nothing alike. The lady's character design is simple and elegant. Her dress and body are colored completely in white, like a blank slate or an innocent soul, naive to the horrors she is about to face, such as the faceless audience members who are drawn completely in shadow. As the lady enters, the shadows hobble forward, heads to the sky, hunched over, some even forming into existence like looming specters. The silhouetted audience members are depicted as looking inhuman, with gnarled backs and stitched up grimaces. We then meet the dancers, the women who will be performing in the show. Each of them wear colorful dresses, fancy shoes, elegant gloves, dolled up hair and headdresses, but all have the exact same face. These faces contorted into opulent beasts to illustrate an unreachable standard of beauty that few could ever realistically reach, and so through every aspect of their appearance demonstrate their elite wealth and status. The lady is shown to be quite poor. All she has is a plain dress with no color to speak of, no gloves, no hat, no posh hairstyle. She does not even have any shoes. She has nothing. She has not even yet had the pleasure of watching the greatest living show once in her life. In this shot, we see the lady facing away from the camera in the distance, the feet of the performers in the refined footwear in the foreground. The lady stands envious of their foothold in society. Pause to laughter. We see during this scene blobs of shadow rising and contorting in the air around the room, and these same shadows being formed by the dancers. The audience is quite literally generated and drawn in by the big-name performers they know and love. The lady is commonly framed as being tiny compared to the scale of the rooms and the colossal presence of both the other patrons and the performers. She must shove her way past the other audience members like a child to reach the front, unable to simply peer over their shoulders to see the show. From the front of the stage, we lay eyes upon the showman, sat mightily on his throne, looking down upon the audience and the viewer like a king, ruling over his subjects. The showman, what an entrance. One hand to his face and one hand twiddling the strings of a marionette. His wardrobe and hair and pose coming together to convey this spellbinding grace and beauty. The showman moves with very careful, meticulous, and gentle moves as he elegantly rises to the stage, displaying great confidence with not even a ghost of a hint of stage fright. The curtain falls to show a glowing white aura behind it, the showman quite literally bringing the stage alight. When the show begins, the tone changes completely. The calm and collected atmosphere becomes booming and loud as animals, musicians, and dancers fly at the screen one after the other. There is a heavy emphasis on the various characters' eyes. The dancers always keep their eyes closed, the musicians have their eyes covered, and the showman's eyes are often obscured by his mask and hat. After the show has begun, we get a close-up of the lady's eyes, lighting up with the sights of the show, her eyes glued to the spectacle on display before her. The globs of shadow that pulse around the screen before have been replaced with globs of resplendent color, representing the sounds of the show drowning out the sounds of the audience. Watching the performance is like watching magic happen. Objects and characters on screen move and contort like something straight out of a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. The showman makes his puppets fly and dance, strings attached to their limbs, each wearing a calm expression as if they are asleep. It then zooms in on their faces, eyes open, profound dead-eyed horror behind their empty gazes, cracks forming on their surfaces from the strings. This one is pulled up suddenly, looking as though they have just woken up, horrified to see their legs have broken right off. The dancers strike elegant poses, oblivious to the suffering of the flying puppets. Meanwhile, the showman stands straight and still, limbs falling around him which he does not see worth it to acknowledge. As in this shot, we see the showman in the middle, the dancers to his sides, each doing a graceful bow, various debris behind them, including a leg still attached to its string, all of them turning a blind eye to the suffering put on display for all to see. The show ends with a flash of light that the lady reels back from as though she was zoned out and needed to regain her composure, only now realizing that the stage is bare, the seats are empty, the performers are all backstage, and the show is over. The globs that rise across the screen now take on a white shade to show that the lady is the only one gazing upon the stage. Was she so spellbound by the performance that she simply lost where she was? Actually, no. You see, there is this eye-like visual that is displayed over part of the performance that pulses hypnotically as if capturing the audience in a trance. It is before this that we see the lady looking forward and the showman is seen smiling right after, as though during the show the two miraculously made eye contact. The showman knew the lady was there. He saw her. He saw an opportunity. When the lady gets up from her seat, emphasis is put on her bare feet turning to leave, to indicate that she is about to return to her simple poor life away from the ritzy carnival. She begins to rise up the steps but pauses and perks up as if hearing a voice call out. She turns her head and wow, what a moment. The lady is in disbelief, her hand to her chest as though feeling incredibly touched and her hair flowing not in the wind, but in the magic swirling in the air. Without even seeing him, it masterfully communicates that the lady is in the showman's presence, the striking presence of a king who has taken notice of you! The background vanishes, the rest of the world disappearing because in this wonderful moment, all that exists is the two of them. There is a slight zoom in present to imply that the showman is approaching until boom! He's right there, positioned like he's taking the lead in a dance before taking the lady's hand, the lady gasping, completely spellbound. In this shot, she floats backward with her eyes closed and arms crossed, standing on her feet again, which break apart just as they did before. Symbolically transported to a whole nother world once again, this time the world of the stage. Instead of going back the way she came, she advances deeper into the darkness of the show, the showman leading her through it by the hand. In the first shot, the carnival was posted above the moon, above the heavens, a place of pure magic. But that was an illusion. The moon we saw only a reflection in the water. Here, we see that in reality, the moon is in the sky and the carnival is planted deep below it, its roots going far down, now colored to imply it is poisoning the earth. The carnival is like a weed, stealing nutrients from the surrounding plants just to prolong its own life. Beautiful flowers bloom and then immediately wilt repeatedly to illustrate how the showman has not only destroyed many beautiful flowers before, but is in the process of doing so even now. The showman and the lady are comprised entirely of strings as the showman leads her on, maintaining full control of her motions, an omen of what's to come. The lady falls again to show that she has arrived at where she has been taken to, but instead of landing softly onto the ground, she continues to fall as if drowning, now no longer wearing her usual wardrobe. We are reintroduced to the lady, now wearing an opulent dress highlighted with lavender ribbons and ties, her hair prettied up with additional accessories complete with earrings. She looks back, feeling the strings on her dress with her hands, much unlike the plain garb she wore before, struggling to comprehend that she's actually here. She is sat at a dressing room table backstage, complete with makeup and a mirror, which instead of reflecting her visage, instead show a sea of white roses accompanied by bright blue butterflies. We saw the same butterfly fluttering around just a moment earlier, and these are the same flowers as well, white as silk, much like the lady herself. In this shot, the lady embraces her dress with both arms, adoring it. So pleased to finally reach the status of the performer she so envied earlier that the rest of the world around her feels just as wonderful. But then, the showman's hand appears to pull her out of that reality, the white roses turning a blood red to show his corrupting influence. The showman stands tall behind her, calmly whispering to the lady's ear with a twisted expression on his face, his eyes tired and his teeth sharpened like the maw of a lion. Meanwhile, the lady wears an uncanny expression, showing a confusing flood of emotions, greatly resembling the vacant face of a large doll. Then the next shot juxtaposes this, showing the showman politely assuring the lady on what to do while she feels comforted in his embrace. You see, there is no objective point of view in the video, and nothing looks like how it should because it is amplified by the emotions of the observer, much like in a dream. We only ever see the lady's perspective, missing all the red flags and frightening details for the beauty and spectacle, or the showman's perspective, who sees the horrors in plain view. This shot is in the showman's perspective, quietly leaning into his doll's ear while appearing creepy and manipulative. Meanwhile, this one is from the lady's perspective, presenting the showman as glowing, handsome, and sympathetic. The key difference being the great care in showing the detail in the showman's eyes in the former, and the complete lack of them in the latter. The lady walks up to the curtain as her dress flows behind her, glowing and sparkling just like the other dancers did, her eyes closed calmly just like them. It shows that she believes in what the showman has told her, and this dress is the proof that she's confident and ready for the show to begin. We see the stage again, and then our gaze falls on the audience, smiling wide with creepy, tilted grins. The audience members resembled monsters before, but now the lady and the viewer come face to face with that perspective. The lady looks up, a crack of light emerging from the stage and landing on her to imply that she is just taking a peek from behind the curtains. The lady turns back, now horrified after having seen the audience like she's just been snapped back to reality. And the showman approaches, now looking more frightening and intimidating than kind and friendly. Several stringed up marionettes in the background behind him to symbolize the realization that something does not seem right. He approaches the camera while in darkness and then steps into the light and opens the curtains with his strings, bathing the lady in a glowing aura. It cuts to the stage, bright, before dimming a bit. Bright because the showman brought the stage alight. He brought the stage her. The showman runs a dark carnival that constantly seeks out new stars to shine their light upon the stage, the lady being the latest victim. When the curtain parts, the light shines through the darkness and makes the truth so clear, the strings on her arms and legs and neck so very visible now, twinkling brightly in the light when they could not be seen in the darkness which the showman revels in. With the stage lit up, we finally get a clear look at the audience. You see, their faces were impossible to make out before because the lady, like all audience members, had her focus on the stage and the show, not the people around her. But now that the lady is on stage, their mocking visages are in plain view. All their faces are twisted into these expressions of horrible glee, their eyes and faces hard to make out behind their colorful and elite masks and getup as they see absolutely nothing wrong with what is happening on stage. In fact, they don't just not see anything wrong with it, they love it. You see how the malices of the masses, holding glass chalices filled with the blood of palace lasses, is callous, cruel, and a source of performance paralysis. We see the audience 3 times in sharp jump cuts, each instance being closer than the last as the reality of what they represent slowly sinks in. The ornate stage disappears completely, instead takes the form of a striped surface matching the stripes on the showman's hat. When the lady was in the crowd watching the show, the stage was alive with all sorts of animals and acts and different people, contrasted with her sitting alone in the audience. But then, when she's on stage, this is flipped. The lady is accompanied by no other performers while on stage, and instead it is the audience that is filled with colorful characters. She thought she would become a part of something bigger by joining the stage, but instead she remains alone, only this time with an audience. The showman's strings tug and pull and nag at the lady's body before ultimately bringing her to him as he quite literally holds her life in his hand. Unable to move by herself anymore, the showman pulls her head up to look him in the eye one final time before yanking her into the sky as he commands. Her skin and her very self start to flake away as the performance tears her apart. The lady loses her dress, the one thing she had, as the showman takes everything from her. In this shot, her head faces the ground while her body spins in front like one of those ballerina music boxes, and the background is filled with jagged line art flashing back to the marionettes the lady witnessed on stage. Because this is the moment that she realizes what the show truly is, and that she is suffering the same fate as those others. Her head continues to twist off, wearing the dead-eyed stare of a doll as the shadow of her former self continues to dance in front of her. And the showman, whom the lady once saw as beautiful and opulent, appears like a demon to her now, flying in to steal a kiss before severing her head completely. He dances with what's left of her body as if it were a lifeless mannequin, completely apathetic to the suffering he caused right there in the foreground. The blood that leaks from the lady matches the specters that enter the showman's book to show that he's harvesting all of her life energy. The carnival melts and falls away into scarlet flame as though it had been conjured from a magic spell. The showman closes the book on this chapter, causing it all to disappear. The carnival vanishes into the night and morning rises. The only evidence that it was ever there being a lone ribbon from the lady's dress caught on some plants, still sparkling even after the end. And then we have the credits, which feature each of the biggest contributors in animated form. Itoki Hana is the flower, Toby Fox is the dog wearing the hat, Bonnie's the crying anime bunny hiding in the trash, and the roll of toilet paper is a clever reference to me since I TP'd my own home while listening to this song on loop for April Fool's Day. And I'll fucking do it again.
Yeah, death to the monarchy!
This goes without saying, but the animation is incredible. Every frame a masterpiece, as they say. Or perhaps, a living painting. Every shot is considered, every detail is meaningful, and every motion is awe-inspiring. The style of the animation with the heavy bloom, meticulously rendered characters, and shaky film effect pay homage to old, artsy, hand-drawn anime from the 90s. Angel's Egg immediately comes to mind for me. The backgrounds. The objects and locales in the backgrounds are fantastical and otherworldly. Each background has this pattern applied to it to make them resemble old oil paintings which were done on cloth canvases instead of paper, and still had this texture to them. But that is an illusion, as the entire video was animated digitally, as is the rest of Bonnie's ethereal artwork. Oh hey look, Hollow Knight. Speaking of Angel's Egg, that movie was one of the big inspirations for Hollow Knight's art direction. We've come full circle, kinda. Well, that's the animation part of the anime music video done. Now it's time for the music part of the animated music video. Now all the text in the video is in English, but the vocals are all in Japanese. The pinned comment on the official YouTube video also features the Japanese lyrics, but there's also a comment from Toby Fox himself that shares the official lyrics in English. Though despite there existing official English lyrics, there is no English version of this song that exists aside from this one formed by, oh yeah, me. You guys like listening to my voice, right? So with all that said, let's start over and go back to the beginning. Silent blue, so cried the somber moon, above the oaken forest starving in the cold. There lay a carnival with a showman's hall, the greatest living show never been told. So I go. This beginning part serves to establish our setting. We are in a forest, an oak forest. It's quiet and dank, it's dark out, and the moon is even visible. It's cold because the trees are starving, or in other words, their leaves have fallen off due to the autumn season, because leaves are how trees store nutrients, which they absorb during fall to hibernate for winter. But above all that is a glorious festive carnival, loud, bright, and warm. It cuts through the atmosphere of this dim world and attracts a lady like a moth to a light. Also, very important, the last line establishes that while the animation alternates between the perspectives of the lady and the showman, the song is entirely from the lady's perspective. She is the one who goes to the carnival, the showman's hall, and witnesses the greatest living show.
Oh, bring the stage alive. Was the amber writing plain across the door, glinting bright, drawing figures from the night? Oh, bring the stage alive. Went the opal-beaked dancers chanting plight, casting shadows that reek of cologne.
I should say for clarity that the O's before these lines are not part of the official lyrics. Those were added by me to perform this song more naturally. Anyway, bring the stage alight. This is the first thing the lady sees when she arrives, and the same lines repeated by the performers in the show. This is the mantra repeated by everything associated with the performance. It is the plight that the opal-beaked dancers are chanting. And you'll soon notice this line is repeated twice during this first half of the song. It's the start of only 2 verses, but in the second half, it's double that, 4 times. The next 2 verses don't feature it at all, since the lady by this point is just an audience member merely reporting what she sees. But then in the latter half, she is part of the show, and so Bring the Stage Alight begins each verse, even when the lady is alone, due to the influence of the showman, it being a mantra of his design. The lady describes the other audience members as figures from the night, as this part is from her perspective, and they literally appear as shadowy figures to her. It also shows that just as the lady was drawn to the show, so were these others. The dancers are the lights, and the audience members are the shadows they cast, hence why it's the shadows that reek of cologne to hide the smell of wine and cigars they engorge upon during the show.
Oh, braving through the sight, to the seats replete with shaking heat and fright. He stands twisting puppets on his throne. Let him raise his arms and mount to the greatest show that's ever, never known. Falling curtains that shine like a bone.
See? These 2 verses break the trend of starting with Bring the Stage Alight, as the lady instead chooses to explain how she had to shove past the crowd to the front and what she saw once she did. First, lines of seats that were replete, or filled, with excited audience members, the heat meaning their body heat, as in a person is there, and their shaking fright being their excited anticipation of what's to come, or perhaps they're afraid because they're intimidated by the showman, stood high above them on an unambiguous throne like a king. When watching the video for the first time, I made the same mistake as many others in assuming his puppets were just people and not puppets, like he just had some women with him. But the English translation shows that you were supposed to see them as puppets first and then realize they are people later, because that's like the twist. And that is lost on you if you don't know Japanese or find an English version, which didn't exist for a whole 8 days. You're welcome. Well, we understand it now. Once again, the showman raising his arms mightily simply describes what the lady is witnessing, that being the showman pronouncing the title of the show, which is lip sync to the lyrics here to show that it's him saying this and the lady repeating what she hears. When the curtains fall, the stage glows bright. That is why the show has never known curtains that shine like a bone, which are dull and very unshiny. It's saying the stage has always been bright and glowing. There is never a dull moment around here. That is why it is the greatest show.
Soaring round above the ground with threads so brightly blaring, mouth apart, a smile twisting like a plaything on a string. Lions roar with force for what is in store as the trumpets are bleating like broken violins. The last curtain is calling for the show tonight. The last curtain is calling for the show tonight. The last curtain is calling for it's time for all little children to take their daily.
The first verse describes the motions of the showman's marionettes, flying and dancing, the strings clearly visible in the light of the stage. The lady is so entranced that she cannot help but smile, her lips parting to create a twisted grin, almost as if her face is moving on its own, almost as if someone is pulling on it with strings. The lions roar with force, and the trumpets bleat because the show is loud and booming. The lions roaring calls upon the marionettes to begin dancing, while the trumpets play a forceful, discordant melody like broken violins, like the puppets that crack and break during this line. Once the show is almost almost over, the curtain calls the performers back to behind the stage, the last call for tonight's show. It has to end because the show goes on late at night while children are asleep, and should it go on too long, the children would awake. The show is a place for fun, horror, merriment, drinking, and smoking. It is absolutely no place for children. It is a place where adults go in secret during the night, and in that way, the lady is kind of like a child who's not supposed to be here.
Then to the lonely middle time, where the star-painted dancers take the lights off. Out go the tired middlemen, who retire in dirty lines. Then to the ending time again, where the haze-heavy room is cold and empty. Trotting across the middle way, a new light colors in my mind.
It is now the lonely middle time, or rather, it's an intermission. The dancers have left the stage, and the audience has left the auditorium to go and get drinks. Being the tired middlemen implies these people have jobs during the day, and can only come to enjoy the show during the night. Once it's over, they retire from watching the show since it has ended, and exit the auditorium one at a time in single file, a bit rank from their drinking and smoking, not to mention cologne. The room is haze-heavy due to the smoky and merriment from the audience interfering with the light of the stage. And with them now gone, it leaves the room cold and empty, much like the wilderness outside. Now that all the lights and colors and warmth have ceased, reminding us of the beginning of the song, the lady walks down the middle aisle like the middlemen before her to leave. But right when she thinks everything has gone all dull and damp, a new light colors in her mind, or rather, she is struck with an idea, a realization that paints her thoughts like the star-painted dancers.
If I love the show, shall I waltz on stage and be a dancer in the glow for all to know? And then the watcher's eyes will be my glaring prize, here in the greatest living show never been told. So I go.
These lines are rather special since they actually come from the mouth of the showman, which are then repeated by the lady, as this is the idea that his light colored her mind with. That if the lady loves the show, maybe she'd love to be part of it. After all, who wouldn't want to be part of something they love? She could become a dancer and shine like those others had, where everyone would plainly see who she is, framing their view of her, their glaring acknowledgement of her existence as the ultimate reward. She accepts and embraces the show as the place where she truly belongs. And so just as she goes to attend the show at the start, now she goes to perform in the show.
Oh, bring the stage alight as I slip into the corset of the night, in the wings when he traps me in his sight. Oh, bring the stage alight. Was the candied whisper made to take my fright? Can't you hear them all calling your name?
Bring the stage alight. Like the Opal-Beak dancers, now it is the lady who is chanting this plight. She slips into the corset of the night, suffice to say, her new dress, given to her by the showman. The showman and his show represent darkness, and the performers represent light. That is why the dress gifted by the showman is of the night. The lady likens the dress to wings to show, even though the dress is tighter than the loose-fitting garment she wore before, that it is freeing, that she can soar ever higher with it on, that it will help why. It is while she is admiring her new dress and high place in the world that she is figuratively caught in the gaze of the showman, someone whom she is unable to simply ignore. He repeats to her to bring the stage alight, this line also being lip-synced. This is his way of telling her that she will do great out there. It's a candied whisper because it's meant to reassure her that she will live up to his expectations. The whisper was made to take her fright because the showman said this explicitly to ease her nerves about making a mistake and keep her ignorant. The irony being that she literally can't make a mistake, even if she wanted to, because the showman is in full control of the show and her. Even if she was scared, there would be nothing she could do. But the showman, ever a man of the stage, keeps up the charade by telling the lady that the people are expecting her, and they are so excited to see her on stage. This line being directly quoted from the showman. It's important to note that during these two verses, when the line of bring the stage alight is sung, you can actually hear two voices speaking at the same time. You can hear the main voice in a deeper, more sinister voice under it, representing the voice of the showman whispering into the lady's ear to bring the stage alight.
Oh, bring the stage alight, with a sequin dress to draw my breath in white. Cheers the crowd, screaming black into the light. Oh, bring the stage alight. But the poems I've been praying don't seem right. Falling curtains that shine on a doll.
Now it is the crowd cheering to bring the stage alight, excited to see the lady's sequined white dress that inevitably leads her to draw her last breath, you see. In the last verse, the showman asked the lady if she heard the crowd calling her name, and this verse is the resolution of that. They are calling for her. They are screaming for her, their twisted grimaces beaming darkness through the part in the curtain and into the light of the lady's eyes. Bring the stage alight? That's what the showman told her to do, it's what the writing on the door said, it's what the dancer said, but what does that mean, she thinks. It is during this final utterance of the line that the vocals become strained and unsure. Having only heard the line be repeated by others, she assumed it was something nice and beautiful, without hope being dashed when she sees it being yelled by the creepy, grinning mob. Her confidence begins to sway and break, the poems she's been praying, or rather the instructions she's been learning, no longer making any sense to her. Bring the stage alight? It does not seem right. Then when the curtains fall, the stage shines once again. They shine on her. She realizes they shine on a puppet on strings.
Soaring round above the ground with threads so tight they tear my head apart, my body twisting like a plaything on a string. Men in masks, they laugh in branding glass through their spectacled grins as I'm falling limb from limb.
In a masterfully horrifying display, these lines directly parallel the lines from the first show. Instead of the threads blaring brightly, they're tearing tightly, strangling her limbs with such force it's no wonder the puppets from before were falling to pieces. The strings rip up her head. Instead of the show and its strings figuratively forcing a smile upon her face, they literally make her twist and dance like a plaything on a string. I must also acknowledge, for the sake of transparency, that in my performance of this song I changed one letter during this verse. I thus do hereby apologize for my blasphemy. Anyway, the next lines describe the audience watching the show, wearing masks to hide their faces, their laughs bellowing into their glasses filled with brandy liquor. It then juxtaposes their fancy, carefree grins with the immense pain and horror the ladies going through. While they laugh through their teeth, the ladies mangle beyond belief. It subtly shows a quiet fury from the lady, the audience, for indulging in this, for doing nothing to save her. They're laughing. The lady is being mutilated, and they're laughing.
The last curtain is calling for the show to end. The last curtain is calling for the show to end. The last curtain is calling for the show to end.
Like before, the curtain calls for the end of the show, only this time now calls for the end of the lady's life as well. It repeats the line of end over and over, almost as if the lady is begging to be freed from her misery. And when it does end, the last voice we hear is not the lady's, but the sinister voice that was behind hers. With her flame snuffed out, she has no more voice to cry suffering, leaving the other voice by itself, the voice of the showman. That's the English version at least, but as you know, the song is not in English, it is in Japanese, and due to the nuances of going from one language to another, various lyrics can change during translation. You see, slang and fancy talk that exists in English may not make sense in Japanese, and words that go together and rhyme in Japanese may not do so in English. And most interestingly, during the translation process, this issue is typically solved by heavily reworking and rewriting the text being translated, leading to potentially brand new interpretations of the material. You can understand this using, believe it or not, Undertale. In the battle with Sans, during the genocide run, there comes a point during the battle where Sans will offer to spare you. If you accept his mercy, Sans will kill you mercilessly, followed by the game over text, "Get dunked on!" Cause like, he just pranked you and you totally fell for it. But as you might guess, how the heck do you say that in Japanese? Well, the Japanese translation team tried all sorts of alternatives before, with Toby's help, finally arriving on, "Huh? You died? That's weird. All I did was try to hug you." Basically saying you were so freaking weak you couldn't even survive a hug. Still a biting insult from Sans, but in a completely different context. You see, it's supposed to be the same line, but the difference in translation allows for new and unique insight into the moment. Before Sans kills you, he says, "Come here, pal," which always sort of implied that, in this moment, Sans was coming in for a hug, which is reaffirmed only in the Japanese version. In the English version, Sans just sort of gloats about how awesome his fake mercy prank was. What I'm getting at here is that there are also some lines in The Greatest Living Show present only in the Japanese version that I would like to analyze. We'll be using the auto-translate feature on YouTube for this, so we're just going to be discussing the gist of these lines. Cause, call me crazy, but I don't think "make your body twist and dance until you're screwed" is an exact wording. Anyway, first line of interest is a stage that no one knows about is there instead of the greatest living show, never been told, so I go. Instead of highlighting the show's enigmatic and mysterious title, it comments on how the stage is ghostly, as if it just appeared out of nowhere. No one knows how it got here, but it's here regardless. Next is, in a frenzy, a filling audience instead of braving through the side to the seats replete with shaking heat and fright. As you can see, the rhyming is much better in the official lyrics. Anyway, the Japanese version cuts through all the fancy talk and confirms what I speculate about this part, that it was describing the audience taking their seats. It is also this part of the translation that includes the word showman, but it's spelled wrong in the pinned comment as schwoman. No, it is not a pun on showman and woman. The art book features the correct spelling, and it is not that. When the show begins both times, we get the lines of come on, fly, dance in quotations to show that these are the showman's words being quoted by the lady, which match up nicely with the text that appears during the second performance. This line is the same in both parts, whereas in the English version they are different. Lions roar with force, and men in masks, they laugh instead. Likewise, in the last chorus, where in the English version it says, the last curtain is calling 3 times in a row, the Japanese version only repeats this lyric twice. The best show, with a slightly different one in the middle, the last chapter. See, this is an example of something unique that they added in. They could have just used the other lyric 3 times, but they didn't. Then there's if the starlight disappears during a small interlude, instead of then to the lonely middle time where the star painted doesn't take the lights off, which confirms that this part of the video is during an intermission, that the show is not yet fully over, and reaffirms that the light of the show comes from its stars. Stars that quite literally shine. When the showman confronts the lady, we get the line, I want to dance with the you I do not know, instead of shall I waltz on stage and be a dancer in the glow. You see, she just wants to take the chance, she's got the moves she'd like to prove, she wants to slow dance with you. The darkness is really getting to me. Anyway, this shows how it's specifically the allure of the showman that makes her want to take the stage, where the English version focuses more on the promise of general fame and glory. Then there's was captured by him, instead of when he traps me in his sight. Yeah, not sure how to pronounce this one. I believe the him in this sentence is supposed to be the showman, which is why it's in brackets. It is the showman who captures the lady like a lion captures its prey. Next we have, however, what do you think? Where is my acting? It doesn't seem correct for the final verse, which is unconventional as it dishes this translation's equivalent line for bring the stage alight, which the previous 3 verses had, to instead include more room to ponder about what's going on. It has the detail that the lady is getting cold feet because she's been told to perform, but not actually what to do. She doesn't know what her act is going on stage. Then the last difference I want to talk about is the final chorus. It's a great show, I hear a voice. It's the last chapter, I hear a voice. It's a great show, it's torn apart, the last moment. Much more variety than the last curtain is calling for the show to end 3 times, like in the English version. This section already repeated the lines of come on, fly, dance, but now it also repeats the last chapter in the chorus, sandwiched between the other lyrics. This version implies the lady can hear the showman's voice during the show, telling her she's giving a good performance while she is tugged and yanked around, just as it is during this part that we start to hear the showman's voice behind the ladies. And with that, we have finally concluded analyzing every speck of this haunting aria. This goes without saying, but the song is incredible, a feast for the ears, as they say. The subtle and meticulous tip-tip taps of the piano keys at the beginning and near the middle, capturing you in these quiet and intimate moments. Then the explosion of sound once we start making our way towards the show as the instruments soar and twist around each other. It pulls back and becomes more rhythmic when we arrive, still melodic and melancholy, but then when the showman appears, the beats grow heavier and mightier under the presence of this great and powerful entity. And then the pulse-pounding, jaw-dropping, horrifically entrancing boom of emotions and sounds that are the 2 performances. The first time, the discord in the instruments and vocals give you the sense that something is wrong, but you do not yet know what. And then, near the end, when the showman snaps his fingers and it all goes quiet, only to then assault you with every instrument in the song's arsenal. The first half very slowly builds up the instruments leading up to the big moment, but here everything is piled on all at once to really nail you with the sudden horror of what you are hearing in a moment that still astonishes me. The accompanying vocal performance by Itoki Hana soars through so many moods and emotions. The calm whispers at the start and during the intermission, the howls of splendor and wonder during the confrontation with the showman, and then the screaming bellows of terror during the final show. Even without understanding the lyrics, you can feel the emotions of our protagonist so clearly and masterfully. Oh yeah, and I guess my performance was kind of okay too. At the start, the instruments are whimsical and the vocals enchanting, but by the end they take a turn towards the horrifying and distressing. When I first heard it, no, for the first entire day after I heard it, it had filled me with a level of despair and hopelessness I couldn't fathom for a while. And it kept pulling me back to it, my body twisting like a plaything on a string. I needed more. I needed to know more. I needed to see more. I needed to rip this video open and find out what lied inside to free myself from its grip upon me.
The majority of the vocals are done by Itoki Hana, and the identity of the deeper voice of the showman is unclear, but I heard somewhere that is Toby Fox after being heavily edited and pitched down. That Toby, always very mysterious about the voice samples he contributes. The background instrumentals primarily feature a piano when the song begins, and then a violin is introduced when we enter the carnival. The piano work was done by Carlos Ayene, aka Insane the Rain Music, the violin work by Noel Sadwin, and the song was transcribed by Marcy Neighbors and mastered by Kataoko Yasuhisa. Carlos and Noel are credited in the video after Bonnie, Toby, and Itoki Hana, but the other two are only credited in the description and on the website. So the video was put together by a total of 7 people. Toby Fox and Itoki Hana have previously worked on songs together, most notably The Sky's Forever Blue, which was animated by Omocat, creator of Omori. Bonnie has also produced various high-quality Undertale fan animations, which, by the way, are the only videos on her YouTube channel and are all years old at this point. If you want to experience the breadth of her body of work, you should go to her Tumblr or DeviantArt page instead. I would also be remiss not to mention this song, 74, also composed by Toby, performed by Itoki Hana, and with artwork done by Bonnie, 5 years before the greatest living show. It is even mentioned by Toby during the spring 2023 Undertale Deltarune newsletter, which was released the same day as the music video, which also served to announce the then upcoming art book. Speaking of which, let's dive into this thing some more, eh? You see, the video's animation was done by Bonnie, who was commissioned by Toby to do it. And to commemorate the release of their latest masterpiece, Toby used his connections at Fangamer, the official merch store for Undertale, Deltarune, and many other video games and media, to commission an official art book for the video to be made and sold on the site. And because I'm this video's #1 fan, I pre-ordered the art book without a second thought and received my copy on a rainy day, the 11th of September. It came with a folded poster of the album art for the song, as well as a novelty ticket to the greatest living show. You know, this poster is quite nice. I think I'll put it right here, right under my map of Hallownest, and this flyer for a monster truck show from 8 years ago. Yeah. Come one, come all to see the Ringmaster's greatest work, the greatest living show. Tonight only howling lions, roaring trumpets, and honey-beaked dancers await. Don't miss the final act where the stage will be brought alight by the world's only flying puppet show.
The stage brought alight.
And don't miss the pre-show where a rabbit, a flower, and a dog will stand on their heads.
Masks and wine are sold in the stands, but it's recommended you bring your own. Oh, don't worry, I never forget to bring my mask.
Now hurry and enter before the children are waking up.
Oh, I get it now. It's a bookmark, you know, for the book. How handy. And I must say, I quite like the glossy gold finish on the highlights. Gives it an ornate quality, you see. Now onto the actual book itself. Some might be a little confused by the cover, which features a piece of artwork by Bonnie depicting the showman and the lady taking part in a graceful waltz, but the book title and author name are on the back. Now don't let this trip you up. This is not an anime book, as a certain YouTuber I know would call it, which are read from right to left. No, the artwork is in fact the front cover and where you are intended to begin reading. I suppose they just decided to get a little fancy. The inside of the cover features a sketch of the showman, and on the first page, the title, followed by 8 lines recapping the story, which match the lines viewable on the Greatest Living Show website. It's mostly stuff we already know, plus a few odd details. First off, the show is described as a carousel. No, not a carousel like the one you ride on, no, a carousel, which refers to a merry drinking party with lots of alcohol. The dancers wear perfume of milk and honey, which tie back to the honeybeak dancer thing written on the ticket. It also spells lions with a Y, like an old-timey spelling that I am not aware of. The second to last line also doubles down on the text on the ticket, referring to the showman as the Ringmaster, as like his official title, even though he kinda isn't a ringmaster. Kinda, cause a ringmaster gets their name from the circus ring present in big top tents where the audience is sat all around on all sides in bleachers. But the stage in the video is not a ring stage, nor the room shaped like a big top ring either. It is instead more akin to a regular auditorium with a normal front-facing stage. I don't know, do you see any rings? Hey Google, what is a synonym for showman? Ringmaster, okay? This was a waste of breath. Anyway, the final line is from the perspective of the lady, professing her desire to waltz on stage and be a dancer in the glow, lured in by the showman's smile. The line previous, trailing off as if the lady is in a trance, has an excellent subtle detail. In the foreword, we are greeted by Bonnie, who thanks us for purchasing this book and offers us some insight into the animation's production. At first, the video is going to be more bare and simple, with limited animation and prominent use of still images, akin to Itoki Hana's other music videos like Break of Dawn or the vocal cover of Two Planets Approach the Roche limit. She originally had 2 months to do it, but after completing 30 seconds of the video and showing it to Toby, 2 months turned into 2 years as Toby decided to give Bonnie all the time she needed to give us the final product. And boy howdy did that decision benefit everyone. On to production. We start with the character design for our protagonist, the lady, who was always conceived as being a stark white, and somewhat androgynous create a pure look, like a doll. Her bright white palette also serves to make her stick out against the shadows of the other characters and the heavy colors of the carnival, which also serves the purpose of showing that she doesn't belong there. The carnival was designed to feel like a shift to another world, a pay homage to the grand and magical carnivals you'd see on TV, as Bonnie's never been to a real one. which is why the stage is wrong. Hello, Jesus Christ, it's not a ring. I jest.
Anyway, on that note, the showman's design was inspired by an odd jester costume that Bonnie encountered when googling carnivals for the video and was the main inspiration for his hat. The design also pays tribute to the style of Bishonen, or beautiful young men in anime, hence his handsome, androgynous features. Bishonen is also a staple of Bonnie's other artwork, alongside the aesthetic of old masterwork oil paintings. On the next page is an explanation for the moment where the showman appears as a demon. He seduces his victims like a succubus, and then once they become dolls, he can enter their dreams in this form to dance with them, either for practical purposes or his own amusement. That's the end of the design section, which mostly sheds light on the lady, the showman, bits of the environment, and little else. The lions, trumpeters, audience members, the other dancers, we don't get any insight on them at all. Well, we get one little piece. In this image, we see what looks to be an early draft for this shot in the finished video. Only instead of the shadowy audience members, it is various dancers walking by, the only behind-the-scenes art we get of them, excluding the storyboards. Speaking of which, those are next. When Toby handed the song to Bonnie for the video, he only gave her a loose outline of the story, the English translation, and the Japanese transcription. Everything else was handled by her. Fascinatingly enough, the one thing I was really hoping the art book would include was the transcription of the English lyrics, because a YouTube comment just doesn't quite seem official enough to me, and I kinda got my wish. The lyrics do not have their own section, rather they are part of the storyboards, both in Japanese and English. What's strange though is that parts of the English lyrics differ slightly from the official lyrics in that YouTube comment I love so much. I believe what this means is that Bonnie received an early draft of the English version from Toby, with some slight changes having been made to it afterward when it was time to release it. The information in the art book comes straight from Bonnie's own notes, I assume, which could explain why some details are inconsistent. Let's go over those. Immediately, the first few lines are different. Instead of "so cried the somber moon," it says "made it a somber moon." So the moon's somberness was caused by the silence of the night? The next line is mostly the same, but the word starving is in a different spot. It's usually after forest, but here it's before oken. The next difference is in this line, where the first word is break instead of then. This is interesting because this version continues the line previous, where the official one just kind of ends in the middle of the sentence. Take their daily what? In this line, the words haze heavy are replaced with the words smoke hazy, perhaps referring to the cigar smoke of the patrons, but was likely changed so it has better alliteration. In this line, the word here is simply completely missing. By the way, and this is just a pointless observation, but the capitalization of these English words are inconsistent. Sometimes the starts of sentences are capitalized, most of them are not. Sometimes I is capitalized, sometimes it isn't. Look, the two identical lines of "so I go" have completely different capitalization. What is going on? Soaring round above the ground with threads so tight they tear me. And that's the end of the lyrics. Yeah, it just cuts off near the end when there's like 18 odd lines left to go. Even the Japanese lyrics stop, which Toby claims the animation was mostly based on. I suppose Bonnie didn't need to reference the lyrics anymore to figure out how to storyboard the rest of the video. Look at me. This is the storyboard section. And I haven't even talked about them yet. Moon. Lake. This shot, which appears for less than 1 second, isn't in the storyboard at all. This storyboard depicts the showman greeting the audience enthusiastically, facing the camera while looking up. In the actual video, he greets the audience nonchalantly at a 45-degree angle looking forward. There was going to be an over-the-shoulder shot at the part where the lady and the showman lock eyes, but it was cut. The following storyboard was also flipped. This storyboard, showing the lady in her seat, was also reworked. It shows her clapping excitedly in the storyboard, whereas in the final animation, she's more stunned in awe and amazement. This shot of the lady looking up in disbelief is absent from the storyboard. The storyboard that features the text "dance" comes in about 4 or 5 words later than it does in the animation. And finally, the part at the end of the credits where Toby falls over is not in the storyboard, so he probably would have just been hopping around forever. Next is an archive of the video's various animation frames detached from the backgrounds. It doesn't feature every frame in the video or show them exactly in order, most of the frames that were cut being the ones where characters are standing still for the most part. Bonnie says a lot of frames in the book are not in the video since in-between frames had to be cut to keep things running at a correct frame rate and keep in tune with the song. And Bonnie is not good at math. However, I find that there are actually more frames that are in the video, but not the art book. For example, this moment where the showman raises his arms in might, the first 2 frames are not in the book, and neither are the last 2 frames. You see, because this section fits very nicely onto 2 pages in 3 equal columns and 7 rows, and having 4 extra frames sticking out would look sloppy, so these frames were simply omitted. And they thought we wouldn't notice. In the scene where the show begins, it fades out to show the lady in her seat, so we don't get to see a few of the last frames, which thankfully are featured right here.
Look here, during this shot, you can see see one of the dancer's underwear for exactly 1 frame. Exactly. Don't shoot the messenger.
Page 33 has 2 frames chopped off at the end. They are hard to see because of the fade out, but they're there, so you don't get to see them in high quality with the new art book. Page 34 has 4 frames chopped off at the start and 1 frame chopped off at the end. Also, for some reason, the shots on these pages are out of order. You see, this one with the showman and the dancers happens right before this one with the dolls. I get that not all the pages are in order, but with 2 shots that are right next to each other anyway, it just seems a little off. On page 36, there's actually a frame between frames 5 and 6 that is in the video, but is missing from the art book. It's this one. Pages 38 through 40 have 3 frames chopped off at the start and 2 frames chopped off at the end. Page 41 has 1 frame chopped off at the end. Page 42 is interesting. First of all, there's 1 frame chopped off at the start, but the art book includes 5 additional frames at the end that are not in the final video for once. The scene in the video is 17 frames, but the art book features 21, even though there are 22 frames in total. The missing frames show the lady wearing an expression of sadness and pain, where the final product cuts when she's still looking frightened and shocked. On page 44, the 11th frame is not in the final video, for that's when the animation cuts to the audience. The 21st frame is also exclusive to the art book. That's when the video cuts to the audience again. On page 47, the 5th frame is also not in the final video. On page 49, the first 3 frames are once again not in the final video. The part where the showman appears as a demon is the last set of frames in this section, which we get to see very clearly here, as in the video these frames are translucent. So in total, in the shots that are featured, the art book excludes 19 frames that are in the video and brings to light 13 frames that aren't. Now, I can forgive most of the exclusions, since they are made for the sake of keeping the pages mostly neat and organized, which is why it's usually frames at the start and the end that are missing. But this one is a bit inexcusable, because it's right in the middle of a shot, which feels like they genuinely forgot to include it, making for the most subtle error I've ever noticed in my reviewing career. Now onto the backgrounds. Check this out. During this panning shot introducing us to the carnival, it begins at this booth, which is cut off at the end. And in the art book, we see that past the booth, there is nothing! Yup, the background continues past it, but was never drawn, which isn't visible in the final video. Sneaky little cut corner there. Unfortunately, the 4 backgrounds visible from 157 to 203 in the video are not in the art book, and neither is the background at 021. I guess they just couldn't fit. Hey, wait a second. The 2 backgrounds featured on pages 60 and 61 are the exact same backgrounds featured on pages 72 and 73. These 2 are from much later in the video. Why are they on pages 60 and 61 with the beginning backgrounds? And furthermore, on page 63, 2 backgrounds are overlaid onto another background, the only instance of this in the art book, which I suppose was done for the sake of space, but the fools! They could have just removed these 2 backgrounds, moved these 2 over here, thus leaving enough space for these 2 to exist without having to cover up another piece of art in this art book. Oops. No excuse. These 2 backgrounds are like weeds. They should not be taking up the space on these early pages which desperately need it. Pages 78 and 79. This is the weirdest looking spread in the entire art book. These 2 images depict this one background from this part in the video, and was split into 2 because the whole thing is just a little too wide. You see these 2 parts that spill onto the opposite page? Well, those 2 little nubs are actually exactly the same. The background is not as long as the art book makes it look. Theoretically, they could have just combined both parts back into one and then scale them down to barely fit, and then there would be a whole row free. 2 slots available where they could have put some other backgrounds. But instead, this one background is taking up the entire 2 pages when it doesn't warrant it, leaving a lot of wasted space. They did this right with the previous background, which also was too big to fit on one page. I don't know what went wrong here. Oh yeah, the background of 345 is not included, and the background of 348 is also not included. It just bites to know that, considering they had potential space available on other pages. Next up is the pan shot section. Essentially the parts in the video where it doesn't show everything on screen at the same time are shown in full here, including the animated elements. Hey, what the hell? That's the background from earlier. They got it right here. Why did they screw it up before? Oh, come on. Not again. This page has even more negative space than the last one. Next up is a series of selected shots, screenshots from the final video that highlight key moments. And they're all fine. Good selections, consistent organization, decent symmetry. What the? Page 124. That's the missing frame. The one they forgot to include on page 36. So they did include it. Kinda. What are the odds? And similar are pages 126 and 127, which feature shots containing 3 of the backgrounds that aren't included in the background section. So many little oddities within this thing. It is just astonishing. But you know what? That's enough of comparing the content in the art book to the content in the video. Because you see, now it's time for the extras section, featuring never before seen artwork done by Bonnie. Let's go through them all.
all, shall we? The first one is a side portrait of the showman titled Overture, rendering him with an aura of mystique and beauty as his hair washes down his shoulders and he glances at you with the subtlest of smiles. This artwork is also what was featured on the inside of the front cover. Blue Moon depicts the moment right at the start of the video where the lady is standing before the entrance to the carnival with a grand display of color. Like the moon shining brightly in the heavens, the lady emits a blue aura as the life of the stage hopes to bring. The moon shines brighter in the night sky than the stars do, after all. Dark, cold, purple roots are planted all around her feet, juxtaposed by the warm glow of the carnival, which bleeds into the plant life so thoroughly that it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. Casting shadows, the lady is walking through the woods toward the show, accompanied by 4 silhouetted shadowy figures drawn gleefully in the same direction through the drab forest, their way illuminated by the dreary light of candles on the path. White shows the lady after having been taken by the stage, facing forward with a lifeless doll-eyed stare, one arm down, pulled by the accessory she wears like the string that would arrest her wrists. Her other arm is held straight up, the focal point that all the white roses bend and twist around, revealing the sinister, blood-pink background behind. The left side is filled with scores of beautiful roses, but on the right they become more sparse, revealing the many thorns hidden behind their beauty. The ugly truth revealed once the curtain is pulled back. This one might be my favorite. In Master's Web, the showman holds the lady seductively to face the audience, one hand around her wrist and one around her neck, demonstrating the absolute power he holds over her life, a smug grin upon his face against the lady's look of silent worry. Charming Growls shows the showman on stage gentlemanly greeting the lady alongside his 3 lions. The lady holds her hands together in excitement, standing on her toes to try and reach the showman's level as he towers over her. Starstruck, the lady disregards the sleepy lions, acknowledging only the showman, missing the signs that he is the most dangerous lion of all, one that has just caught sight of his prey. When the children are waking up, depicts the showman no longer in costume, leisurely looking through a book while coloring with one of his lions. Not this book, but that book. The title implies that this is how the showman is during the morning, as the show happens before the children wake up, so after the show, the children are beginning to awake and the showman goes from a devilishly handsome dude to a regular handsome dude. Dance with the Flowers depicts the showman in his devil form, waltzing by his lonesome, one hand ripping away the life energy from a scarlet flower, symbolic of the many women he has deflowered across his career. And finally, Dancing with the You, I Do Not Know, which you may remember, calls back to that line that was exclusive to the Japanese version of the song. You see, the you that she does know is the showman, the one on stage who performs to his adoring audience, and the you she doesn't know is the man behind that visage, the demon who steals women and forces them to dance upon his stage. This piece mirrors the previous one, the lady stepping the opposite way, one arm down and the other one out, just like the showman, a profound look of calm and acceptance upon her face as though she is dancing in her sleep. Bonnie said that the showman would appear as a demon in his victim's dreams, so these two pieces, when put together, depict the exact same moment of the showman toying with the lady while she is powerless to do anything about it, as she dances with the side of this man that she couldn't see, as she dances with the you she did not know. It's such a beautiful and haunting spread, showing how dreams and nightmares are two sides of the same coin. That's the end of the original artwork, but there is technically one more. This one, creatively titled Please Buy My Art Book, posted by Bonnie online to advertise, you guessed it, the art book's release. It's another portrait of the showman, only this one's front-facing as opposed to a side profile. The showman holding his mask in one hand so you may peer deeply into his entrancing eyes. Next up is some technical stuff. As I said, the video gives off the look and feel of old hand-drawn anime with hand-painted backgrounds, but the entire video was done digitally using Paint Tool Side. It goes into Bonnie's process for animating, which much like my process for writing is all about trying to get from point A to point B, these two moments that we need to find a way to naturally link together. The entire video was animated using only 35 colors and 3 different brushes, and you may recognize the messy animation line art was repurposed for the moment where the lady loses her head. And at last, on the final 2 pages, we get the deets on Devilman's Strip. Guide on how to dress like a Bishi showman. Get it? It's a pun on Bishonen, you see. If you wanna dress like the man of the show, you gotta have the This Reminds Me of hat, the silky ruff, the blood red tailcoat, golden cufflinks, lace-up shoes, spectacular makeup and eyelashes, a luxurious mask. I already have that. Sharp teeth. I already have that as well. You also need a ruffled shirt with emerald green buttons, a good waistcoat, well-groomed, horrific fingernails. Okay, so far so good. Smooth, white gloves. Damn it! All my gloves are black! I'm starting to give up on my dreams. Next, fine waist-high pants, an empty head, long, silky hair. That's why it's called Master's Web. His hair is made of strings. Hello, Jesus Christ.
And finally, buy a tall, beautiful man to dress up. And if you do not have the money to purchase a tall, beautiful man, well, then you can just use yourself as a substitute. It will have to do. Then the inside of the back cover features the artwork of White, and so ends the art book. Overall, a fascinating resource and a wealth of insight into the production of an already fascinating music video, the new artwork being the absolute highlight. Though it is not perfect, there are little errors that you wouldn't notice perusing through the book normally, but upon taking a magnifying glass with a thing like I have, it baffles me, some of the things they miss. The most egregious error easily being the two backgrounds which appear twice while other backgrounds are missing entirely, among other gallery glitches.
It's honestly kinda crappy. Or maybe it's just depressing, you know?
Still, I cannot undersell the novelty of being able to hold a piece of physical media featuring Bonnie's otherworldly artwork, which is undeniably worthy of being displayed in a museum. A short round of applause, everyone, for our little artist who has come so far. Come to think of it, we've come pretty far ourselves, haven't we? We've analyzed the animation, we've analyzed the music, we've even analyzed the art and how it all came to be. All that's left now is the big picture. What is the message and story being presented to us by these three hooligans? So, with all that said, let's start over and go back to the beginning one more time. It is a cold and quiet night. Our protagonist, the lady, doesn't have much beyond the clothes on her back. But the carnival shines a light into her bleak world. It's something new and different and exciting and fanciful. It shows to her that life has so much more to offer than she ever thought, and through it experiences things she could have only dreamed of. She experiences art. When witnessing the show, the lady's primary reaction is sheer amazement. It's unlike anything she has ever seen before. Contrast this to everyone else's reactions. The other audience members smoke and drink during the show like it's nothing special, as people who consume art regularly and have grown tolerant to its marvel. The showmen and the dancers perform so calmly and nonchalantly, like what they're doing is no big deal, as professionals of the art world who do not stop to admire their own work. The showman makes what he does look so easy, with his careful movements and his smile, which never disappears from his face. He is always smiling. Before the show, the lady was driven only by her curiosity, but after the show, she is filled with wonder, art, inspiration, and ambition. Like any artist, she aspires to do what they do, the ones who inspired her. If watching the show made her feel so much splendor, then surely being in the show would be so much better, right? Because then instead of experiencing the feelings of one person, her own, she could bask in the flattery of many people, a heightened wonder elevated because she was the one who delivered it to them. But what she doesn't realize is that the business of creating art has a dark underside, one that she only begins to see after she joins the show. It looked all fun and elegant and grand when she was just watching it, but when she lands on stage, it dawns on her the ordeals one has to go through to make it happen. It's not as fun as she thought it would be, as she gets completely in over her head. It comments on how many artists and famous people can crack and break under either their workload or the pressure and expectations of their audience. I mean, look no further than Toby Fox, creator of one of the most popular games of the last decade and currently toiling away at his next masterpiece. Or what about Bonnie, who spent 2 whole years creating this, her masterpiece, working on it every day and night, on weekends and holidays and all throughout May, both of whom, might I add, deal with chronic wrist and arm pain, common hazards faced by artists and especially those who create with their computers. It's so common that at this point, becoming a digital animator or game developer means wrist pain is more an inevitability than a probability, the pain being tied to the creative process. Much like the strings wrapped around the lady's wrists. During the show, she loses her head, dress, and both arms, with only her body and legs remaining. The strings bind the hands and mind of the creator to their work, or in this case, the stage. They must work. Their work is not over, so they must continue, even if it leaves their body in an unworkable state. And then there's the showman. The showman represents the poisonous influence of stardom and business on art, as he takes gullible performers away and exploits them for his own benefit. He deliberately seeks out new talent, promising them everything they could ever want, but once you make that deal, sign that contract, he owns you, like one would own a doll or any object. It's no mistake that the people he steals and turns into puppets are exclusively women, as women tend to be exploited and objectified in showbiz. Just as the lady is tricked and turned into a literal lifeless object, her dress falling off during the show so the male audience may gawk at her figure. These famous people stand as figureheads in the world of art, names and faces that everyone knows, and what upstanding gent worth his salt hasn't heard of the showman and his great flying puppet show? They fly so wonderfully, they dance so beautifully, they look so realistic. Do you want to know why they call it the greatest living show? Because it's the best, you see. To be in his show is the highest honor, attracting the talents of dancers, musicians, and more, eager to work with the great showman. The showman, as the ringleader of such an influential and important creation, stands high above everyone else, like an untouchable god. The fans idolize and worship the creators of media they so enjoy, and never imagine they could reach the status of someone so great as he. The dancers play the special role of attracting audience members, their influence, and the spectacle that they are collaborating with these showmen, generating crowds in droves. After all, who wouldn't want to see what the creator of Undertale and the creator of Omori could cook up together? With Lena Raine, composer of Celeste, with Game Freak, creators of Pokémon. It's exciting to see these giants of creativity on stage side by side. How many people started off as awestruck fans only to find themselves present before the mastermind himself, bringing to light a new work? Like Bonnie or Itoki Hana, both fans of Undertale who rose to the occasion to help Toby create this video, The Greatest Living Show. A music video that succinctly tells the story of a fan-turned-creator who meets her hero, the one who inspired her, only for it to all go horribly wrong as she is confronted by the crushing expectations, the physical strain of the job, and the golden opportunity that turned her dream into a living nightmare. And that is a true horror story. That is the greatest living show never been told.
These are puppets I do not like. Shoot him! And burn it all down.